UFC has decided to settle their antitrust lawsuit. About 1,200 fighters were represented. John Fitch, Nate Quarry, and I believe Kung Lee were the original guys that put forth this lawsuit against the UFC in 2014. And then afterwards, it was Cajun Johnson back in 2021 and CB Dalloway along with some others that joined in. They were looking for upwards of $1.6 billion and at least $800 million. The settlement was for $335 million. My question is, for the fighters that were represented in this lawsuit, is it a win for them? Obviously, the answer is no. First of all, congrats to those fighters that were represented. They at least get some payouts and, some relief. Luke Thomas that broke it down and said maybe 30% will go to the representation.
But $335 million to be dispersed over a period of time that the parties agree to. The lawyers are going to take a hefty amount. I've seen some estimates at around 30%. If you actually look at the math on this, if the lawyers end up taking somewhere between 20 to 30%, and there are roughly 1,200 fighters who could have gotten money, it ends up, and some will get more than others, but it averages out to about $280,000 per fighter, minus 30% all the way around. So not a lot of money for the fighters in this particular case.
As far as the lawsuit itself, it was about, the UFC basically lowballing the fighters, not paying them what they're worth, and also eliminating other MMA promotions. We've seen some promotions go under. The UFC basically, holds a monopoly over the MMA world. Why is this a loss for, the fighters? First of all, they were looking for $1.6 billion and they got $335 million. So the UFC and, their parent company Endeavor, TKO owning both the UFC and WWE right now and having a stock, this is a win for them because $335 million is chump change to them, and it's also not $1.6 billion. So this is a win for the UFC and their parent companies. And also, what do you know? The stock went up 5 points as soon as this news was delivered. So that should tell you something. I believe Dana White is somewhere celebrating right now because the UFC was in some trouble. If, they had gone to trial. The trial was set for April 15th, I believe. They were going to go to trial. If they had lost this lawsuit, the UFC would have to start paying fighters a lot more. They would have to, give way to a lot of MMA promotions such as PFL, which Dana White obviously does not want to do. He wants to step on these promotions and make sure that they never reach the level of the UFC. And that's where the win comes in, because the UFC does not have to change their ways. They don't have to pay the fighters more. They don't have to, make way for these MMA promotions to thrive. They literally will continue doing exactly what they were doing before because they didn't lose this lawsuit. They ended up settling for an amount that they, are, I'm pretty sure, ecstatic about. This is also a loss for the future fighters and a loss for, the current fighters who are looking, forward to maybe this antitrust lawsuit changing things in the future. And maybe the UFC was going to have to make huge payouts and all sorts of things, right? But there's no changes coming. So Dana White and the UFC got exactly what they wanted with this settlement. Apparently, after they asked some of the fighters that were representing this lawsuit, they said that in order for them to get about $1.6 billion that they were looking for, they would have to basically start over again, combine the two lawsuits, and maybe, go into litigation again, and maybe in another decade, go for another trial. They would have to basically spend about 20 years fighting this case. So that's why they settled. Let me know what you guys think about the situation. Maybe you thought this is a win for the fighters, or maybe you think, this is a huge win for the UFC and their parent companies. Let me know, comment, like, subscribe, share. I appreciate it. Peace.